Okay, we're going to get started in just a second there. We're ready to go? All right. Hello, everyone. I will say that the staff are awful serious out there today in this right before Christmas meeting. I'm feeling like we should sing some Christmas carols or seasonal stuff because I don't like seeing you all with these serious faces, but instead, that's more like it, thank you. So we do have quorum. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'm going to start with land acknowledgement that Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality recognizes, we acknowledge the Peace and Friendship Treaty signed in this territory, and we recognize that we are all treaty people. And just since one of the things that we've been asked to do, an elder said at an FCM meeting I was at a year ago that we should try and ground the land acknowledgements in things that relate to the committee. And since I was just talking about how it's holiday time, I want to acknowledge or talk about how the Mi'kmaq Concordat in the 1600s, the Pope recognized Mi'kma'ki as a Catholic country, and it was the first non-European country sovereignty to be recognized as Catholic after Chief Membertou had them join the church. So that is a significant thing that is often forgotten in our histories, and I think it's a good thing to remember at this time. Today we are joined by, we have regrets from Councillor Purdy and Councillor Cuttle. Councillor Outthit has indicated he will try and be here, but he's not here yet, and we've decided to go ahead. And we have the delightful Councillor Cleary and Councillor Lovelace here to give us quorum, so thank you for coming. And we're just going to dive right in. We'll look for a motion for approval of the minutes of November 24th, 2020. Moved by Councillor Cleary, second by Councillor Lovelace. Is there any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. This is an easy meeting. I just have to look in this direction. I don't have to look around and count or anything. It's great. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Madam Clerk.
Yes, Chair Mason. There are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
Moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Lovelace. Any further discussions on the, what are we at? Approval of the order of business? Question has been called. All those in favor? Thank you. Business arising out of the minutes, none. Call for declaration of conflicts of interest. Does anybody walk on a sidewalk or drive a car or ride a bike? No? Okay, all right, we'll move on. Motions of reconsideration, none. Rescission, none. Consideration of deferred business, none. Notice of table matters, none. Correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Madam Clerk, correspondence.
Yes, Chair Mason. There was no correspondence or petitions received by the clerk's office for this meeting.
Thank you very much. And were there any petitions from the members present? Seeing none, we'll move on. We've decided, and this was a decision that we made in agenda review, that this is a kind of an added meeting that wasn't originally in the schedule. So we've asked those folks that were on the list for presentations to come to the regularly scheduled January meeting. So there are no presentations today. Item 11, there's no information items brought forward, brings us to item 12, staff reports. And we're going to start with 12.1.1, the update on the AAA Bikeway Network Plan. I see Dave McIsaac, the manager of Active Transportation, has come to the mic, and thank you for doing this at my request. I really appreciate it, to you and to Executive Director Anguish, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David McIsaac, manager of Active Transportation. And thank you very much for the opportunity. I could go 15, 20 minutes with this, depending on the indulgence of the committee and some body language out there. So I'll do my best to kind of get us through fairly quickly, but we got a lot. But we appreciate the opportunity to come here and give you an update on our work. So just a bit of background. We have been working on planning and implementing bike infrastructure in Halifax probably from the early 2000s. And, kind of previous to the integrated mobility plan in 2023, we focused on painted bike lanes without any real kind of direction or priority placed on completing the network. And multi-use pathways. Those are kind of our two main facility types that the municipality was implementing to facilitate bicycling infrastructure. This changed in 2017, very late 2017, with the integrated mobility plan approved. And there was direction for safer bicycle facilities, driven by a number of things, but just to highlight a few. First of all, the profession was changing. The design guidelines coming from the Transportation Association of Canada, from the National Association of Transportation Officials, that sort of thing, were proposing and guiding our planners and our engineers to build safer, more protected facilities. A line down the street, painted line, provides additional space for someone bicycling, but as a vulnerable road user, sharing the space with heavy and fast cars, the direction sort of was gradually shifting through that decade to provide safer facilities for looking for separation. So that was a driver. Certainly when we were out doing engagement for the integrated mobility plan, we heard from the public and stakeholders that if we are serious about building a bicycling network, if we are serious about attracting people who don't bicycle now, we needed to focus on safer facilities for vulnerable road users. And then finally, our own internal assessment, and certainly what we were hearing is that particularly in some places, for example, Hollis Street, painted bike lanes were not working. People were parking or loading in them, which they're legally allowed to do. But in that kind of an environment with so many competing uses for the street, if we were serious about providing safer bike facilities, we had to look at something more separated. So this all led to Action 72 of the Integrated Mobility Plan, which was to build an all ages and abilities network of bike facilities in the regional center. When we talk about all ages and abilities, that is a term that came out of the City of Vancouver around 2015 that they developed working with consultants from Europe, which was around thinking about a painted bike lane. That might be good for some people, but for the general public, for people who don't bicycle now but who would like to, we needed the types of facilities that provided the safety and connectivity for people bicycling. And then the final sub-bullet there, because I think it's important to mention that while this particular commitment and action gets a fair amount of profile, there is a lot of other active transportation actions in the IMP that we've been working on across the municipality that are equally important or very important as well. So again, here's just a couple of, the three kind of main facility types, and these are defined in the professional guidelines and thresholds and that sort of thing are established. But on the left there, we have a protected bike lane on the northern end of South Park Street. So the protection there is an actual physical curb. Sometimes it's a precast concrete curb, that kind of thing. In the middle is a multi-use pathway, which is a shared walking, biking, rolling kind of facility, and that one there is on Ahern. And then on the right is a local street bikeway. And those are corridors that are, they're local streets that provide great connectivity for people bicycling, where people share the road, people bicycling share the road with motor vehicles, but where we go in and put in elements like traffic calming and sometimes traffic diversion to help manage those conflicts and minimize the number of motor vehicles using those corridors. Really on those streets, we want the motor vehicles to be the people who live there and the people visiting there, and bicyclists are the rest. I guess I don't show you on this slide, which is something that is something we spend a lot of time on, and that is a challenge for us, is the intersections. So where a local street bikeway crosses a main road, or where some of these facilities come together, you know, you can have all the separation and that sort of thing, you know, that you see here, but if you don't get the intersections designed properly and manage those conflicts, then you're almost negating the benefit of what you see in the corridor between the intersections. So our target in 2017 was represented by this candidate route map that you see here on the left. If you sort of add up the blue lines, red lines, and green lines, what we were talking about was adding about 15 kilometers of each to what was a pre-existing amount of about 12 kilometers, just under 12 kilometers that existed in 2017. What I kind of highlighted there at the bottom, just to draw a bit of attention to it, is that when you add up all those lines, that's about 57 kilometers. As we go through the planning and implementation of this network, you know, some of these candidate routes are adjusted. For example, the Dartmouth North route that council approved last month is shown there on some local streets. We kind of moved it over to a parallel corridor following the planning process. So that number is probably going to go up or down a little bit by the end of this, but it is kind of where we started. Something I just, again, I get a lot of questions sometimes about why does it take so long? And part of the reason it takes so long is because there's a lot of steps to getting these facilities built. Especially, you know, we're not working with a greenfield, we're working with existing infrastructure in an older city, and getting to that ribbon cutting and beyond there's a fair amount of work involved. So it takes us between 16, you know, half a year to a year and a half, and it sometimes can be longer to go through the functional planning process. And that's kind of where we take those lines on the map and figure out what they're actually going to look like on the ground. So that, I kind of sometimes call that the proof of concept. And that's typically what we take to council for your approval. And you can see some of the steps there. Then we get into, you know, our group kind of hands it off to our colleagues in the design and construction group within Public Works, and they take on the engineering side of it and do the preliminary design, the detailed design, and get it ready for construction. And again, you know, there are, you know, if you're, you know, for example, if on South Park Street on the upper part where we kind of pulled the curbs in there, all of a sudden that's sort of changing the overall configuration of the street. It impacts drainage. It impacts lots of other street functions. So that's what my colleagues in the design group there kind of work with, changing the right-of-way. And that's the design process. And you can see some of the steps there. Land acquisition, a big part of what we kind of sometimes hold us up is part of that. Then we get into construction, and that takes some time. A lot of our projects, again, if you're working in the right-of-way with existing infrastructure, it can be very complicated work, and so that's an important part. And then ongoing, you know, we'll communicate to launch the facility. We monitor our facilities either using eco counters, which are embedded in the asphalt, or through yearly sort of other surveys. So we want to know how many people are using them. We want to monitor safety. On our local street bikeways, we need to know how many cars are on them and how fast they're going. So that is a very important part of our work. You know, that third bullet there, year-round maintenance, you know, I could do a presentation on this, or my colleagues in IMO could do a presentation on this. So, you know, once we build it, it is a substantial job to maintain it, to clear it, to get the gravel out of it, and I would say it's, and I think they would say it's something that we've been learning how to do. We have dedicated staff now to the tactical infrastructure and interim infrastructure that we have. And then that fourth bullet, you know, adjustments as required. You know, after it gets built, we take in comments, we observe it, and are going back and adjusting things as required. And I would offer up the example of some of the end units on some of the bike lanes. They're precast concrete, it's what we put the sign in. And in some places, because of the tightness of the street and other things going on there, they've been, knocked off continually. There's probably about 5 or 6 trouble locations around the municipality. So we have a group right now looking at those and coming up with a different solution, because, those are just eating up our operations time to go in and put those back. So, that is an example of how we're going back to update and improve on what we've already built. So our first projects went in 2018. A couple years after that, we were fortunate to receive $25 million in infrastructure funding on projects that we think are going to cover between 2020 and take us to at least until 2024. That is a great deal for the municipality in that we pay about 17% of those total costs, and the other orders of government cover the rest. We had, in 2017, targeted completion by 2022 for some of the reasons that I described and that I'll talk about in a second. We'll be at about 50% by 2022, and we expect to be at plan to be at about 70% by 2024 with a combination of permanent, interim, and some tactical infrastructure. We've also moved out the planning timeline out to 2028. So that's our budget, and that's working with our design and construction colleagues to kind of fit it in the overall transportation capital plan of the municipality there. Final bullet there speaks to the fact that, we have gone from not doing tactical or interim installations at all 3 years ago to doing substantial and ever-increasing number of tactical interim installations. So these are quick build type projects which improve the safety for people bicycling and help make those connections, and that will be in place for anywhere between 1 and kind of 5 years until we come in behind with our more substantial project. And there's a picture up there of a traffic diversion measure at the corners of Isville, Young, and K Street in the north end, and that has been helping reduce the traffic volumes on Isville Street, which is a major kind of north-south corridor, and helping to improve the conditions for people bicycling. So one of a number of tactical projects that we have implemented that we are continuing to implement. So there's a lot here. This is sort of some of the main reasons why these projects take so long, why it has been a challenge to meet our perhaps naive target that we set back in 2017. I'd say the first one is just our internal capacity. When we took the IMP for approval, we did highlight that we were going to, it just wasn't going to happen magically. We were going to have to change how we work. We were going to have to probably add some new staff. And it's taken a bit of time to get us there. So, we've needed additional resources on the design side, additional project management resources, and a couple of extra resources on the planning side. And I think I just want to highlight, this AAA Bikeway Network is a number, and I think you all know this, a number of other significant transportation projects, capital projects that we've been planning and implementing. So it is, in the mix of the top priorities, but all of these things take staff time. It has taken us a bit of time to learn and adjust and adapt as our planning design guidelines and practices come in. So like I was saying, a lot of these design guidelines that we're following are relatively new in North America. And none of our planners, none of our engineers learned this when they were in school. So they've been learning, and they've been taking those lessons and trying to adapt them and put them in the Halifax context. And what you see in the design guidelines are usually beautiful wide corridors in imaginary cities built on flat plains. And taking those and adapting them and putting them in and fitting them into our city is it's a complicated process. And internal capacity, it is just not Public Works who is involved in planning and design these. Our colleagues in transportation planning, our colleagues in transit, our communications colleagues, corporate real estate. When we have a project and we knock on their door, they know that we're coming and we're going to take up their time. And it's going to be important work. So again, we need to the time it takes to work across the organization is one of the factors influencing our timeline. Land acquisition takes a lot of time. I think you've heard this before. We don't need a whole lot of land to build this network, and we deliberately try to avoid land acquisition because of the time, the cost, the complication, but in several cases, there's been no other choice. And it can take, we usually have willing, property owners who are willing to work with us, and it literally can sometimes take years. We have to work around development encroachments and integrate with those. So, for example, we've got like a huge development project right now happening on Almond Street. We have, the developer there has been great to work with in terms of integrating the final bike lane in there, but that hoarding that you see there has been up for a couple years. It might be there for at least another year, and it is sometimes difficult to even plan around that. So, and that's happened in 3 or 4 places around the municipality. We've had to spend some time working with our provincial colleagues to get the regulations in place for these types of facilities. So that's taken time. Dependencies and other projects and plans. So some of the bikeway projects are subsections of larger projects. The Cogswell project down the road here is a great example of that, where that segment of AAA bikeway network is only going to be finished when that project is finished. Like a lot of we've had to deal with some supply chain issues, that's impacted our engagement. There has been a challenge just even last year with some of our internal resources because of labor shortages and that sort of thing. So I can't, it's been a factor. And then the other thing that we're dealing with right now is sort of this unprecedented unpredictability of costs and cost increases. So that has, we've had to kind of move some of our projects around a little bit to deal with that. So those are some of the excuses. Happy to go into any of those. Just to these are some of the things we have to deal with. And as we plan these projects, we come up with, for example, community concerns. And, I'd offer up the planning for the North End Bikeway as an example of that, where north of Almond Street, pretty straightforward planning process, not a lot of contention. But when we got south of Almond Street, there were larger issues happening on those streets in that community that around parking, around historic discrimination, about gentrification, about what had happened on projects on neighboring streets that kind of overwhelmed us. And really, we had to sort of step back and work on a different approach. So things like that take time. We have to, understand parking and curbside access impacts for all of our projects. Emergency access. We need to make sure that the ambulance and the fire truck and police officers, their access is not impacted in travel time. So we work with them a lot. Vehicle movements, we still need to make sure that the vehicles can get around, that people that those can still happen, and those will change as part of our projects, but it's an important factor. Anyway, I'm not going to go through this whole list, but just to give you a sense of a lot of the things that we need to face and integrate and factor into the planning and design process. So we have this new updated timeline going into 2028. That is a lot less naive, I guess I would say, than where we were in 2017. We know a lot more now. We have expanded staff capacity. We certainly have a lot more professional guidance and knowledge internally about how to plan and implement these types of facilities. We're pretty much finished that first stage of the planning design process on the entire network, and everything's been started, and I feel fairly confident that we'll be through all of them, maybe with the exception of one, but probably all of them by next year. And looking forward, a lot of the projects that we have coming are projects where my colleagues over in asset management are chomping at the bit for bigger street rehabilitation projects. So there will be some good synergies with some of those projects going forward. However, and this, just to highlight, what happens going forward is there's still a lot of uncertainties. We still, it will be really interesting to see what happens with project costs and what budget we have to work with going forward. None of that's guaranteed. The land acquisition piece, if that can, if there's at least one or two there where if it takes time, things will move out. I think we're going to be able to finish our functional plans, but again, sometimes unforeseen things happen. And then dependencies with other projects. So, we've got one part of the AAA network is in the middle of Dartmouth, kind of parallel to the Shuby Canal corridor. There is a larger project to daylight the Sawmill River, to upgrade the Prince Albert, Alderney, Portland Street intersection. And, that section of the AAA network will be built when that project is ready to be built. And our group doesn't have a lot of direct impact, influence on that, so that's a dependency that we're going to have to deal with. So I guess what I have here now is kind of a series of maps that attempts to kind of illustrate where we started. And you're seeing where we started there in 2017, and just kind of take you through annually kind of what we built, where we completed the functional planning and the detailed design, and also some of the tactical projects. So, this was the picture in 2017. There was about 12 kilometers of completed, that's the green, which is almost entirely multi-use pathway, except for the McDonald Bridge Bikeway, which was separated. And you can see a couple little dots. Those were our first separated bikeways on Rainy Drive and on University Avenue. And our first year of implementation, we were able to build the Woodside multi-use pathway, the Ahern multi-use pathway, and Dalhousie University built kind of a painted AT facility through some parking lots between Spring Garden Road and Morris Street, near the library there. Moving on to 2019, we were able to start building the Vernon Street and Allen Street local street bikeways. We got our first, I would say, curb-protected bike lanes in South Park built. Hollis Street was mostly built, and we were able to, great project where a project that a lot of us thought could never be done was getting the Barrington Street multi-use pathway north of North Street and the bridge up to Niobe Gate. And we had a great partnership with the Department of National Defense and some great cost sharing that made that happen. 2020, this is when we started, the infrastructure money started kicking in. We got South Park Phase 2 built. Got some signals on Vernon Coburg, and started, really expanded our tactical program, working with our colleagues in transportation planning. 2021 was a big year, I would say, in terms of getting that Wise Road piece done. Now, when you entered or exited the McDonald Bridge Bikeway on the Halifax side, or on the Dartmouth side, you kind of spit out in probably the most complicated and busy intersection in the city. So, making that a lot easier to navigate, I think, makes it a lot more accessible for more people. This year, we're looking at the exit 0 Joe Howe over here is we're finally going to have a half decent connection from the peninsula out to the western mainland and points beyond. We're getting Terminal Road and Hollis built, and we finished the Dahlia local street bikeway. And we're not quite at 50%, but we're getting pretty close. There's about 8 kilometers of tactical bikeway that are partially built right now, and that will be completed in spring 23. Next year, looking to get as much of Almond Street built as we can, subject to that encroachment coming down, and a few projects on Dartmouth Harbourfront, a bit more of Ivesville, and I'm not sure it could even be in, but working with the Cogswell team, we're going to have a reasonable, it's not an, it's going to be a constrained detour, but you will now be able to bike around that construction project. And just, I don't know, just to kind of highlight here, I guess you can see my cursor, but, things like this kind of tell me that the network's starting to come into being. So, if you can see my cursor here, if you live anywhere in Dartmouth along this corridor, if you live in the Flower Streets, you now have a pretty direct connection all the way across the bridge, all the way downtown, and back again. Same thing if you're living in the north end of the peninsula. You've got a pretty, using tactical measures and what we've built right into the downtown. So the connections are starting to be made, and this is encouraging, at least for those of us working on the project. 2024 will be, I think, one of our biggest years in terms of getting the Halifax side of the McDonald Bridge bikeway connection built. I think you're going to hear about Brunswick Street after me, and that's going to be a key corridor. But again, starting to see some of those connections come together. And I'm just going to kind of flip there. It's just nice just to watch. Magic. I would say, what happens in 26, 27, 28 could move around a little bit. One could go 1 year, one could go another year, could be done sooner. As those projects get a little bit closer, we'll have a better idea of when exactly they'll be built. But right now, that's where they are in our plan. So another thing to highlight, I think important, is that as we have implemented, we've learned a lot more about how much these types of facilities cost. We've certainly had to adjust our budget and our expectations based on what we've experienced in the construction sector over the past couple of years. So, right now we're looking at a total build-out cost of about $72 million. Given the cost sharing that we've been able to take advantage of, it'll be in the range of about $50 million. That's what we're planning for right now. And our cost-sharing agreement with the provincial government, we expect that $25 million will more or less have that completely allocated and spent in 2024. Those new costs or those expanded costs are in the long-range budget plan that council is looking at right now. So we're doing our best to make those costs clear and budget for them and prepare for them going forward. So I'm almost done here. I just wanted to put a couple of slides here on the McDonald Bridge Bikeway Connectors project. It is probably our highest profile project. It is probably our most expensive single capital project, although there's a few more kind of high expensive projects as well. And to give you a bit of update on where that is. So this is critical. You can't have a regional center AAA bikeway network if, on one side of that network of the only link across the harbor, you're making cyclists, do what they do right now, which is, duck under the bridge, bike on a sidewalk, mix with buses, mix with trucks. It is, almost potentially the opposite of a AAA connection. It was the #1 project priority coming out of the Active Transportation Priorities Plan, and it is critical. It is expensive, and the costs, again, continue to go up as we, our functional plan for the structure and the intersection changes. We're at about $5.5 million for the estimate. As we've continued the design in 2021, it had gone up by about $3 million. And we've recently done another estimate looking at newer unit costs and factoring in sort of construction mitigation and traffic control and those kinds of factors that we'd really need to pay a lot of attention to at an intersection like this. And right now we're at about $12.5 million for an estimate. Why we haven't built it, I think we had it in 2023 most recently, but the complexity of how to plan in that tight area has taken some time. It is a bikeway project, but it is our project managers from day one, started calling it a multimodal project because of the transit network improvements that are part of it, the pedestrian improvements that are part of it, the need to think about it as a place, and as a place for urban forestry and that sort of thing. So and there's a lot of pipes under that area as well. And we are just about to do a peer review value engineering exercise, so that's going to take a bit of time. Currently, it's in our plan for 2024, and our HRM project manager, who took over the job about 6 months ago, he's driving hard toward that. So just to talk a little bit about what this value engineering process is, you know, we gave you a bit of a preview of this at the November 22nd meeting. And why we think we need to do value engineering or peer review or a sober second look at this project right now is based on those cost estimate increases. You know, if we're going to spend that much money, I think we just really want to make sure that that is the best solution, that's the only solution, and just give us that extra level of assurance. It's been looked at a lot, but this will give us one more opportunity to make sure we're on the right track. We'll look to see if that current option can be built at a lower cost, and we will, you know, we'll look at other options. I think, you know, an at-grade connection has often been discussed. It's been looked at, but there are, you know, there's impacts to that. You know, it impacts the safety for the bicyclists, it impacts the grade, it impacts the vehicle movements through there. So, but we'll look at that again. And maybe there's a different way to align the structure that could save us a bit of money. So, you know, all that will be part of the value engineering process. We're working closely with Halifax Harbor Bridges on this. They've been a key stakeholder all the way through, and we'll be doing this work in 2023. There's a graph or a diagram there at the bottom that gives a bit of a sense of what the process is like. So I won't get into that too much, but it's essentially sort of looking at what we've got, seeing if there's other ideas, working with those stakeholders to kind of brainstorm and evaluate, and then coming out on the other side with either kind of a confirmation that we're on the right track, some tweaks to the design, or potentially, you know, a more significant change. So, and we're going to come back to council. I think we committed to doing that, or there's requests from councillors to do that when we talked about this at November 22nd. So there will be another opportunity for council to look at this significant project. Just one slide to talk about a lot of things. So in addition to planning, building, and getting this infrastructure on the ground, there's a big chunk of other work that we're doing at the same time. So, like, you know, the operations and maintenance side of it, we've got a new crew that came into being last year. We updated our winter snow clearing standards to make sure our facilities were incorporated and prioritized in those. And it's an important part of this work that probably doesn't get enough attention. We do a lot of education and promotion. So you can kind of see we've done a couple years of the Get There by Bike, kind of social marketing, billboards, that kind of thing. So just to kind of put it out there that things are changing, that there's more facilities, and to you know, complement our infrastructure investments with some promotion education. We have a great project this year that I hope we continue with the Ecology Action Center, who are doing lots of great community-based bicycle education work. There's our crew out there sweeping the Hollis Street bike lane. That's we have a sweeper that was disabled. So those are our people out there kind of clearing glass, and I can't say enough about those folks. These are our eco counter lines in 6 locations, 3 more coming very soon for our monitoring, and we've got our amenities. This is some bike corrals that our operations crew look after. And then the Wise Road, that's just a snip from a video that, you know, as we put in bike lights and new types of infrastructure, we've done our best to get some education out there for all road users how to use them. And that is the update for now. So thanks for the time, and obviously happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McIsaac. Let me flip over and see if there's anybody on the list. Really, Sean? All right. Very thorough. I'll speak from here if I may. Part of why I asked for you folks to be here, why I asked Brad to get you to bring this together, is because of two kind of saying already. Time's up. One is, that it's hard, right in the heels of this, the mayor of Montreal got reelected and announced 400 kilometers more bike lanes in 4 years. And I'm just kind of like jaw on the floor. How are you really going to do that? And maybe they've already done all the functional and detailed designs already, and it's easy for that promise to be made, because I certainly remember when Tanya Davis was still here, we had a lot of people saying, look at how they built that 3-kilometer lane in Winnipeg in one day. And she's like, I know all the people who designed that, and they've been working on it for 3 years. So I know a lot of work happens the public isn't aware of, but there is a feeling that things are going very, very slowly, and indeed they aren't hitting the timelines that we said publicly. And that's a problem, because myself and especially Councillor Austin and Councillor Smith, who can't be here today, have been out there defending the timeline that staff gave us for like the last 3 years. And I for one, have been saying during budget, do you need more resources? Do you need more resources? So one of the things I'm hearing is, you have them now. It wasn't in time to stay on the timeline, but we have the internal resources now to deliver this, which I think is important to recognize. But it's still disappointing, because we've been out there telling people, no, it's going to be fine. We're going to get it done, and we're not, and that's hard for people to accept, including I think a lot of councillors. My questions, I guess, and my other big concern, of course, is the increase in cost means that it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out once the federal and provincial funding runs out. But I have a lot of hope, as we're about to learn with the Rainy presentation that's going to happen, that when we talk about value engineering, like that project has been all over the place in terms of budget, and I think it's landed in a place that it's doable and livable, and I'm really pleased. I can't wait to see that presentation. So my questions are, I'm wondering, Brad, if you could talk a little bit more about, we talked around, but we didn't go into the detail that you gave some councillors when we were, bugging you about it. The construction, the cost, everybody knows things cost more money right now, but there's specific issues on these small projects in terms of like being able to get the qualified labor, and why it's important that we have production management in-house now, because it's not Dexter who's coming to build these things. It's smaller folks who maybe have been challenged on this and other things like pedestrian and safety and the speed humps. And I think it's important the public understands the difficulties we've been having there. What I've been seeing is that an awful lot of sidewalk and curb replacements happening like up until this week, because a lot of people who have the contracts have just not been able to marshal the resources to deliver. So if you could talk about that. To Dave, my questions to you are Devonshire and Windsor and stuff. So we're looking at a full-on separation. One of the questions I get a lot is, how come we don't just do bollards on Bell Road, on Windsor, or on Devonshire, right? And I think there's probably good reasons for that. And then my second question for you, Dave, is, we're aiming for 2024 on the bridge, but what I saw, since I'm a little less shocky today looking at your slides, is the full network looks to me like it'll be in 2026, and then by 2028, a lot of tactical will get replaced. I'm wondering if you could kind of cut, when do we get to the point that the network is 95% done? Because I think that's what people are looking at. And I'll just end by saying, my push here is, I know the intersections are one of our biggest issues, but the more tactical stuff we can do faster, the faster we get a network that starts to drive ridership, that helps to further justify further investment. And so I like what happened this year in a way, all the tactical stuff. I see, because it means that we've got stuff in the ground and we're starting to see those changes on Slater Street and whatnot. Andrew, could you put the slides back up? Because I guess let's go to Dave first, then we'll go to Brad, because
Yeah. Well, I guess I would stress that in sort of 26, 27, 28, I can't say exactly what's going to happen in those years. I would highlight up at the end of the north end of the peninsula is our Africa AT Connections project. That's kind of shown right there as a going down the hill at the end of Novalee and staying that grade. We'll probably be coming to council with an update on that project, but that's going to be an $8 million project. So that's kind of out there. This little segment here of Brunswick Street will kind of really depend on, you know, we'll figure that out after the dust settles on Cogswell, pretty much. There's already painted bike lanes there. Hugga is sort of this interesting project at the bottom of the south end that would connect into St. Mary's University, but it doesn't it doesn't kind of come up in terms of priorities because it doesn't have multiple connections. Still a great project. And, you know, this Penhorn up here, that'll get built as part of the development of the Penhorn lands. So I kind of put it in 26, 27, knowing that that could change as well. It's kind of a dependency. But, you know, looking at the core network, you know, you're seeing that Morris University corridor done, which is critical. You're seeing that connection across the upper end of downtown on Brunswick Street finished. There's a lot of connectivity there. In terms of tactical, again, that will, you know, will come into like Creighton and Maynard streets, you know, more or less when the integration with the road rehabilitation happens. Devonshire will get the tactical treatment next year. It'll get, plan right now is for precast concrete curb. You know, that's a buffered bike lane, so there is room to actually put the curb there. So we might be pretty much, you know, get to what we need on Devonshire next year. But there will probably be need to look at some of the midsection there. Windsor Street, we could probably go in and have talked about doing, you know, just working with what's right there now and at least putting some bollards on there. But we need to figure out the Windsor Chebucto Kennard intersection first. Or not first, but, you know, we could put the bollards up. But if we don't have a way for the bikes to get through there, the bollards are helpful, but probably don't encourage more people or people who are not comfortable cycling in mixed traffic right now. So that's the main issue on Windsor Street.
Okay, we'll go to Brad for the specific contract stuff.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. On the industry side, I think everybody's very familiar. Demand exceeds supply significantly at the moment. That's both the province and the municipality calling upon the private sector to deliver more at a time when labor is tight. Particularly, it shows up, traffic control this year was a very difficult sector. So even if the labor was available to do the construction, the traffic control was very difficult to get. And that has resulted in delays right across all of our work, getting out the door to industry and the completion thereof. And you'll see our stats will be down this year, both in tendering and what is constructed. What I would I just want to amplify something Dave said, is that one of the things we're doing is we're making sure that IMP is built into our planned delivery of tenders. So to the best of our ability, without holding up work unnecessarily, we are making sure that our road safety and IMP deliverables are going as early in the year as possible. Now, the tactical work that we just launched at the end of the year, that was really just trying to get it outdoor and make sure we get it done as fast as possible. That's kind of the exception. But we are trying to take council's priorities, IMP priorities, and make sure they're tendered as early as possible within the year to make sure they get done. But yeah, there's no doubt. And where is that all materializing? Well, it's materializing in delays. It's materializing in quality of life for citizens because the sites are open, as has been mentioned. Construction sites are open a lot longer than they normally would. The costs are increasing significantly. We just ran some numbers again this year on our unit rates. We're probably looking 20 to 30% higher as what we saw, the experience we just had this year. So it's having a lot of impact. Cost, timing, and then finally quality of work. You may have seen the ad this week. Lindsay Construction has hired a VP of employee retention. That is critical. For the longest time, it was really felt that labor could just fly around between the companies. It was always there and it was in ready supply. What we're now seeing, and you've seen it on a couple of the jobs that I won't mention here, but we've had a couple high-profile jobs in the municipality that have not been completed to a very good standard. And that goes back to, labor experience, quality of workmanship, and of course, we've had to step it up on that front to try and make sure that what taxpayers are requesting in terms of quality and total completion is actually occurring. So we are seeing large amounts of rework and warranty work, again, slowing us down. So yeah, there's challenges within the industry. What I will say is they're there, they're listening, they're responding, and they're doing the best they can to work with us. So finally, my last remark on that is with Ed Surratt, we hope by next year, we will have 2 to 3 years of detailed capital plans. So right now, as you know, you get 1 year, you kind of get your in-year detailed street plans of what's going to be constructed. We're trying to push that to 3 and eventually 5 very quickly. Again, primary reason that is allow industry and our utility partners, because utility alignment with these projects is significant, to give them much more time to get ready and be in there with us when the streets are open. So hopefully that kind of answered your question.
That's great, thank you. We'll go to Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for this presentation. Lots of great information about what's happening in the regional center. And certainly, I grew up in Edmonton. I completely understand being able to get from one side of the street to another, or being able to get from one side of the city to another safely. The questions that I have are around, number one, the education. I think we haven't done a great job to help people understand the provincial trail system and the use of that to be able to get into the urban area. I think we need to do a better job promoting the BLT, for example. Folks are using it, and I think if we had more inclusive graphics or more explanation for folks to really see the large scale of this, that would be very helpful. My other question is on data and how we're actually looking at demand data. So for example, if we're talking about commuters and commuters specifically, we're missing the opportunity to think about that inclusive, complete community. How a child gets from their home on their bike through to their school, for example. And, when we look at West Bedford, a brand new school opening up, well, the kids in Kingswood are not going to be able to get to that new school easily and safely. So, again, while we are looking at the regional center through this presentation, I think we also need to take it a step outside of the regional center and look at ways that we could create that comprehensive planning for how someone can get to work or shop or to meet up with family or whatever, in those suburban areas. You mentioned bike signals and bike crossings and working with the province on that. Dave, I'm just wondering if you could help me understand that provincial role. We've asked for bike crossing on St. Margaret's Bay, safe bike crossing from the trail. We really haven't been able to get that. So I think that's important for folks to understand how the province is involved in those bike signals and bike crossings. You mentioned asset management and looking at those bigger design projects. I mean, this is obviously very complex, right? You're redesigning a section of a neighborhood, of a community. And when you do that, I'm wondering, how do the utilities play into this? So for example, if Halifax Water has a 5-year plan to do upgrades, are our staff in the loop and making sure that, maybe we don't do this project in the next 2 years, we wait and do it along with Halifax Water, for example. And you mentioned functional plans, and Brad, can't wait to see this functional plan for Hamas Plains Road and thinking about ways that, Hamas Plains Road can connect safer to the Bedford Highway, and from the Bedford Highway, get down, into the urban area. And so, the mix between the multi-use and the bike-specific lanes, I think we need to just, again, take a step back and look at how those all actually work together. Because when you create a bike, create safety on a street for bikes, you're also doing that for pedestrians, right? My last question to you is around the parking, because while parking is permitted on that paved shoulder or on that bike lane, it's not permitted on an area where there isn't a paved shoulder. You know, your wheels have to be off the pavement to correctly park. So I think there's some confusion in the public as far as, well, what is the rule? What am I allowed to do? If I can park on a paved shoulder, then why can't I just park on a shoulder but still have my car, you know, my wheels on the pavement? So I do think we also need to make sure that we're educating the public on what those rules are, and I'll stop for there because I guess I'm out of time. Thank you.
Over to you, Dave.
To you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, yeah, thank you there's a lot of interesting points there. In terms of promotion, I agree. And we are right now sort of looking at what we're going to do next year around education and promotion. And I think it's a great idea to talk about some of those facilities and ways to get around and connections that we can make, you know, outside the regional center. We've done a little bit of that. We recently updated our website page on these types of facilities, but I'll bring that back to the group, and it's good timing for that suggestion. Data. So we get data from our eco counters. So those are, they'll not tell us who is using them, but they'll tell us, they'll give us a lot more than just trip to work data. So that is helpful. You get a lot more of those, probably trips to the grocery store or trips to class in the middle of the day. One of our monitoring programs uses MyoVision and cameras, so we can capture some of that information about demographics. But usually to get that kind of data, you actually have to be on the street and observing and.
So I'm speaking about demand. Not
like
use,
who is using it?
Who would?
Okay.
Who wants to, right? Like
All
how,
right.
like the demand side of the data, right?
Yeah, so I don't have the figure in front of me right here, but the best information that we have on the demand, on the people who would like to bicycle more, comes from a study that we are a partner with that's run by some researchers at Simon Fraser University. So they have, as part of their work, it's called the Canadian Mid-Sized Cities and Bicycling Study or something like that. We'll send you a link after.
Yeah.
And so they, as part of that study, for 3 years, I think back in 2018 and then maybe around 2020, that might have changed because of COVID, and then recently, they hired Environics or someone to do kind of a, they called 1,000 people in families or residences in the municipality, in the regional center, but also in kind of the suburban part. And there is, boy, I wish I had the data with me, but I guess what I would say is that there's a huge latent demand out there. It's at least something like 50 or maybe even higher of those people called said they would like to bicycle more. They could see it fitting into their daily lives. The main obstacle was the lack of connected, safer facilities. So that's
Okay.
That's also I think we might even have that on our website, but that is that, and that's consistent across cities. You see that a lot in terms of what the general public is saying. So bike crossings. So on the bike signals are something that I don't know, the previous council and maybe even the council before that had asked the province to enable the use of bike signals in the province of Nova Scotia. So that was a change to the Motor Vehicle Act that needed to be made. And it finally happened in last year. And within 4 months, we had them installed on Wise Road. So, we don't need bike signals everywhere, and there's probably even not many places that we need them. But at complex intersections, particularly where there's bidirectional bikeways, where you need to kind of create a phase for the bikes to get through, they're essential. So it's a tool that we needed for places like Wise Road, that we're going to need for Brunswick Street, and not having the ability to use them was a barrier. And we put a few projects kind of on the back burner until we had that power, that provincially enabled power to use them. The other challenge or improvement, I guess, that we're looking for on bike crossings are what we could potentially do in conjunction with RRFBs, kind of the push buttons, or even signed crossings, where right now, if a pedestrian pushes the button at an RRFB, then the vehicles need to stop for them. That's what the law says.
Yes. Yeah.
But the bikes don't have that same power. We do not have the ability on some of these crossings to sign it so that a bike, that the cars would have to yield to the person on the bicycle as well as a pedestrian. It's also really important on our multi-use pathway network, on the you know, when the Chain of Lakes Trail crosses Chain Lake Drive and Horseshoe Lake Drive and those kinds of facilities, you know, what, you know, should happen for the bicycle to get cars to yield is the bicycles needs to dismount and then get that across. What we would like to have the ability to do is to put a sign on either side of that tells the cars, you know, when the RFB light is on, you need to yield to the bikes and the pedestrians. And so that's something that we're working with the province on, and that's something that needs to change nationally. It's just not Nova Scotia that's dealing with that. We're dealing with that. We're talking to colleagues nationally, and that's the use of crossrides. So anyway, that's something that we're working on, and one of the kind of regulatory improvements that would make our implementation a lot more straightforward. Utilities. So as part of our functional planning processes, we do public engagement, but we also do stakeholder engagement. And that, you know, we knock on the door, we get meetings with Halifax Water, Nova Scotia Power, Heritage Gas, probably forgetting one. But basically to let them know, these are the corridors we're looking at.
Nova Scotia Power.
Nova Scotia Power, thank you. And to get a sense from them of, you know,
Okay.
with Halifax Water, it's like, do you have projects on this corridor coming up that we can integrate with? With Nova Scotia Power, it is almost always about utility poles and the time that we need to give them to move utility poles. Heritage Gas, we can usually, you know, work with gas lines pretty easily, but we definitely need to bring them in the loop and make sure that what we do doesn't impact their operations.
What about business patios, like restaurant patios and things like that? Are those are impacted?
Yeah, you'll hear about that, I think, in the Brunswick Street presentation
Brunswick
next.
Street,
Yeah,
yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, we're looking at how the street operates now, and what might have to change
Right.
if we put a bike facility. So that is, that's one of the many things that we need to look at, for sure.
Thank you so much for your comprehensive answers. Appreciate that.
Go to Councillor Cleary. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you. Some of the discussion prompted a few of the questions I have. But I'll start with the hardest question first, one that I'm pretty sure you won't have an answer for, or at least one that satisfies us. But is there anything you, us, management could do to get the network built faster? Given all the
Through you,
challenges
Mr. Chair,
you
to the
laid out.
councillor, you know, we have thought about this in a certain way, and I don't know if, you know, I can't say for sure. You know, again, I highlighted the fact that this particular project gets a lot of profile, but you know, I spend as much time talking about UT with Councillor Lovelace about things going on in Hubbard or ownership of the provincial trails and stuff like that out there as I probably do with you talking about Oak Street, or you know, Councillor Russell about the 101 crossing. So, you know, if there was direction from council to like only focus on the regional center for the next 4 years, maybe we could make some progress. but we wouldn't get the, we wouldn't get the connection, the important connection between the Woodside Ferry Terminal and the Shearwater Flyer. We would not, get folks who are getting off the bus and stepping into a ditch on Cobblequid Road in Lower Sackville a safe facility, sooner. So it's really that balance of capacity and dollars and the huge need for safer facility that exists everywhere. We're trying to get rural
staff,
sidewalks
more money,
built.
more contractors, or alternatively, we could just knock off all the suburban and rural counselors. I mean,
I did not say that.
50-50.
So, I'd
yeah.
say if there was a really, a concentrated priority, maybe we could move things along faster.
No, that's the answer I expected. So when you were talking about bike signals and crossrides, because crossrides was one of those things we did ask the province for as well in that whole list of things we want to change for the MVA. And so I was intrigued when you said it's really a national problem. So is it a TAC thing? Like, is it recommendations to all of the transportation authorities across the province or across all provinces that basically is prohibiting them from moving in that direction? Is there any jurisdiction in Canada that has crossrides legalized?
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor. So I have been at a couple of these TAC meetings. It's me and the engineers, and the issue is not necessarily that it's prohibited from a national guidance perspective, it's that there is no national guidance upon which kind of local authorities or local jurisdictions kind of can base their design.
Could we get creative around things like, I'm thinking, so we do half signals, for example.
Yeah.
Could we do a half signal bike signal?
So yeah, so then what you do fall back on is the signals. So it was interesting at that TAC committee, our colleagues from Quebec, who are probably about a decade ahead of us on these types of facilities, he said we just put signals wherever we can. The way that they deal with it, and that's how kind of we've been doing it as well, is using signals because those obviously give you the clear priority and establish the right of way. So that is an approach, but it's an expensive approach, and it kind of sometimes it's overkill in a certain way to add a signal where you could get the same safety benefit and create the gaps for the crossings with an RRFB and a sign that would
Yeah.
cost $20,000 or even less potentially.
Well, yeah, I think when we did the mid-block half signal on Quinpool a couple of years ago now, I think it was in the budget for $225,000 because it had curb extensions, utility work, the new signals, paving, and so it can get up there quite quickly. Brad's shaking his head, and it could probably now. Well, I was just going to say now at 20 and 30% inflation every year on construction, it's probably $400,000 today. So very quickly then, in the very little time I have left, Windsor, Chebucto, Cunard, you said that was challenged. But given that we have bike signals, could we not do a bike phase only to get people through there? And I don't know if this has ever been looked at. I'll let you stick this in your hat and think about this later. But I don't know what impact that would have upstream and downstream on traffic there. But I mean, because that's a constricted area, and that's one of the things we've been looking at that as Tristan calls it, the quantum intersection. So if they had their own phase, but then pedestrians, because the issue right now is it's somewhat unsafe for pedestrians because of the way it turns. You have people lagging, and it's almost like you need to have kind of a lagging pedestrian interval rather than a leading one, because you end up getting those cars doing the left going north. And I've heard from many people who called me, I almost just got hit. So anyway, I'll just let you think about that you might have an answer now, but maybe you haven't thought about it yet.
You wish to share the councillor. So I don't think we've thought about it, but I will bring that back to the group. There's 4 or 5 of us that have been trying to make a plan for that and come up with some options and maybe even a tactical option. But so I will definitely bring that back to the group. Let's add one more element into that intersection just to
Just block.
make it more quantum.
Just block Pam's number from your phone.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cleary. Thank you, Dave. That intersection is a passionate thing for me, because I think I've said to staff, and I think Dave's heard this, that's where my wife got hit by a car, but the car was going about 5 kilometers an hour. So she said it was the most slow motion bike up under the hood, no damage, but the person was so confused by the intersection, but the 8 to 10 to 12 million bucks to redo that intersection is not a bike cost. It's a cost to everybody. The 20 to 25 million, I just got the up signal, because, as I said to Dave in our meeting yesterday about Peninsula South Complete Streets, just 2 days ago, I saw a car with Ontario plates go through that intersection, turn right, and see the red lights and stop. It's never going to work for anybody the way it is right now. It needs to be updated. To Councillor Lovelace, I would say a lot of what you were talking about in there was the people don't know anything about biking, and why would they when the last time the province updated, as I said a while ago at council, last time they updated the handbook for drivers was May 2005, and the online version and the print version that kids are still taking today doesn't have any of the HOV or bike or any of those things in it. And I would say, I look forward in the spring, I hope, or summer to the fall and suburban, the rural and suburban plans that we've asked for biking and pedestrians to come back. But I'll just close on this. I'd like to thank you very much, Dave, for this hour and 15-minute grilling. Good for you. You're a champ. And, the big takeaway here is we have a new timeline. The stuff that would move from design to permanent in the out years in 2027, 2028 wasn't even in the commitment in the integrated mobility plan. Those are things we've added, right? So to me, getting to the point where the original plan is built and it's 2 years delayed, while still sucky and not what we wanted, is arguably defensible because of COVID and all the labor issues. If we articulate the timeline that was in those slides, have it on the website, update the timeline that you already have there, and we got to stick to it. We have to do what we say and say what we do. And if we're delayed again, which may happen because who knows what the future holds, we've got to be very quick to own that and talk about that at Active Transportation and Transportation Standing Committee. Because I think our goal right now, why I asked you to come here today, was we need to try and work really hard to rebuild confidence with the public who feels that they don't know what's happening. And I know you're working very hard, and I think this help explains a lot of it, of where you're at. And I hope that was useful, but I really think that we've got to get that timeline online, and we've got to, make sure that we deliver. So thank you very much for coming. I hope you and Ed are sticking around for this next thing and all that. You're leaving. All right, good, very good. Thank you very much for that. So we'll close that one out, and we'll go to the next piece is 12.1.2, Brunswick Street Complete Streets Active Transportation Connector, which I'm very excited to see. So take it away when you're ready.
There we go. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Catherine Peck, and I'm a landscape architect with Transportation Planning, and I'm going to discuss the Brunswick Street Complete Streets project with you. I do have some of my colleagues with me here today who will help me answer any questions you may have if I'm unable to do so. So David has discussed a lot of this already, but the policy rationale behind this project, it's driven by 3 main policies: the Integrated Mobility Plan, the Active Transportation Priorities Plan, and the Regional Center Streetscaping Administrative Order. It also aligns well with the Urban Forest Master Plan and Halifax 2050. The primary objective for the project was to confirm the corridor's vision as a street and a place as directed by the IMP and the AT Priorities Plan. We wanted to understand the potential configurations available for the corridor and to fill in the active transportation gaps and improve the quality of active transportation infrastructure for all users. We also wanted to understand any potential trade-offs coming out of achieving the desired vision for the corridor, and we're seeking council endorsement of our proposed plan. So the study area we're talking about today includes Brunswick Street between Cogswell Street and Spring Garden Road, as well as the section of Gottingen Street between Rainy Drive and Duke Street. As some of you may be aware, Rainy Drive was originally in scope for this project, but due to some competing priorities right now, that has been temporarily tabled and will be looked at a later time. This project will connect the existing Sexton campus multi-use path, the future Cogswell Street Bikeway, the existing Rainy Drive bi-directional bikeway, as well as a future bikeway along Sackville Street connecting to South Park Street. So currently Brunswick Street accommodates an average of 15,000 vehicles per weekday. It does have sidewalk constraints, unprotected cycling infrastructure, and little to no streetscaping or placemaking features. The portion of Brunswick Street south of Sackville Street, extending to Doyle Street, has very narrow sidewalks, especially along the west side. It has an uneven surface and no street buffer. Between Cogswell Street and Duke Street, there is some minimal streetscaping that's occurred following the current downtown standards that's associated with some recent developments in the area. And between Duke Street and Sackville Street, the segment adjacent to Citadel Hill, one of the most prominent sections in our city, there are no streetscaping or placemaking features currently. So as far as the existing cycling infrastructure in the area, there's currently on-street unidirectional bike lanes on both sides of Brunswick Street that end at Sackville Street, and they do not connect to Sexton campus or the Spring Garden area businesses. There is also tactical protected bi-directional bike lanes on Rainy Drive and Gottingen Street. So through this project, we've come up with a recommended treatment. To address these challenges and provide a AAA connection, we considered multiple design options as part of the project. These are discussed in the staff report and in more detail in the larger functional plan report. Each of these design options have been evaluated against the priorities in the IMP and the Complete Streets Framework in the 2021 Municipal Design Guidelines. The three concepts were presented for online public engagement in August and September of last year. Consultation with external stakeholders, business districts, and Parks Canada was also completed. A detailed breakdown of all the engagement results is in the functional plan report. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm only going to discuss our recommended design option. The majority of the changes proposed in the functional plan do occur on the west side, on the Citadel Hill side. It proposes a raised bi-directional bikeway on the west side of the street, with landscape space separating the bike lane from the sidewalk and a hardscape buffer between the bikeway and traffic. Bicycle signals and some turn restrictions are proposed at Duke Street and Sackville Street, and the plan does narrow pedestrian crossings at intersections wherever possible. It also provides enhanced crossing treatments at Spring Garden Road. The design will eliminate parking on the west curb for the length of the project area, and all on-street parking south of Sackville Street will be removed. We are remaining all the existing traffic lanes with just some changes to turning movements. So over the next few slides, I'm going to show you the existing conditions followed by the proposed conditions for each of the segments in the corridor. So between Cogswell Street and Sackville Street, the current sidewalks are wide but have no buffering or streetscaping. There are on-street painted bike lanes. Power and utility lines are underground, but the street lighting is mainly highway-style Cobra head fixtures and not the pedestrian-scale ornamental lights that we're used to seeing in the rest of downtown. Loading needs are primarily on the east curb, as the west side is dominated by Citadel Hill, and new construction primarily has off-street parking and loading accommodations. So the proposed treatment for this segment increases the sidewalk width, provides space for trees, furnishings, and snow storage. It maintains curb access where it's needed most on the east side, and includes curb extensions to reduce pedestrian crossing distances and increase pedestrian storage space at critical intersections like outside the Scotiabank Centre. We are proposing to eliminate curbside access along the west side, as I mentioned. So this is a zoom in of the Gottingen Street, Duke Street intersection. You can see that we've added the curb extensions outside the Scotiabank Centre and the additional pedestrian storage space that this will provide. The additional space is also provided at the steep northwest corner, which can be used to help soften that grade and make it more accessible. So between Sackville Street and Spring Garden Road, we have a concrete sidewalk which is very narrow. It's about 1.8 meters at most, with pinch points that go less than 1 meter. There are no streetscaping features, and the area has parking on both sides. There are very few parking or loading needs along the west side, and the majority of the east side destinations do have off-street parking and loading access available to them. The power and utility lines are above ground for this segment, which is largely responsible for many of the pinch points that we do see. So between Sackville Street and Doyle Street, we are proposing increased sidewalk widths, which again provides space for trees and snow storage, some street furniture. The proposed cross-section does eliminate curbside access on both sides of the street. It does also provide consideration for the existing patios, specifically at the corner of Brunswick Street and Doyle Street. Steve Areno's Cappuccino, we have allowed for the fact that they have a patio, and we know they would really like to keep it. We are seeking council endorsement to proceed with plans to bury the existing overhead power and utility lines along this segment. That will go a long way to improving conditions here. The Sackville Street was mentioned by Dave earlier. It is one of the challenges and one of the reasons this wasn't delivered tactically previously. So at the Sackville Street intersection, the dedicated right turn channel will be removed, allowing the creation of a large plaza at the foot of Citadel Hill. We have been speaking with Parks Canada about opportunities to improve connections between the city and the hill and potential integration for interpretive elements here. And finally, the last piece, looking at Doyle Street to Spring Garden Road. This segment was reconstructed recently as part of the Doyle Block development. The reinstated curb and the placement of the trees were designed to allow for the implementation of this bikeway. So the trees will remain. We will just be paving a section of the existing sod, and we will look at whether or not soil cells will be required underneath the asphalt to help preserve those trees, because right now they are doing very well. Looking at Gottingen Street, currently has a tactical bi-directional bikeway on the south Citadel Hill side. There are no streetscaping or placemaking features. There's also no existing curb access in this area. Power and utility lines here are currently above ground. And we are looking again at increasing sidewalk widths, providing space for trees, furnishing snow storage. We are looking at narrowing the roadway width to the standard 8 meters from the 2021 municipal design guidelines. And again, we are seeking endorsement to bury the existing overhead power and utility lines along this portion of the corridor. So looking at the traffic impacts, lane configurations have been modified to allow space for the buffer between cyclists and vehicles, as well as cyclists and pedestrians, while preserving parking along the east curb. The sidewalk buffer provides space for the placemaking features I've mentioned, as like trees, public art, street furniture, and interpretive elements. So on the screen is the Cogswell Street intersection. At this intersection, the street widths are being reduced as part of the Cogswell project as well as this project. The existing configurations are shown in gray and changes are highlighted in color. In both the eastbound and northbound directions, the existing dedicated left and through lanes are being combined and the dedicated right turn lanes will be maintained. Moving south to Duke Street, at the Gottingen-Duke Street intersection, the existing tactical changes will become permanent, combining the right turn slip lane into the existing through left lane. And in the southbound direction, the plan proposed combining the dedicated left turn lane with the combined through right lane. When we modeled this change, it did show longer queue lengths during the AM peak. As a result, we have reevaluated our allocation of space here, and we believe it's possible to keep the existing lane configuration, although that's not shown in the plan. The trade-off here would be the elimination of 3 proposed trees and the reduction of that landscape buffer space for a short segment. We are recommending that this be further evaluated during preliminary design. And finally, at the Sackville Street intersection, the existing westbound right turn channel will be removed. This is replaced with a dedicated right turn lane, which provides comparable service levels to the existing conditions. As well, the dedicated southbound through and left lanes have been combined. In the northbound direction, the northbound left onto Sackville Street has been combined with the existing through right lane. So with a bi-directional facility, cyclists, in this case the northbound cyclists, will be moving contraflow to traffic, so in the opposite direction. And will be unexpected in an unexpected location for motorists, where right-hand turns will cross the cyclist path of travel. Turn restrictions will need to be in place. The proposed protected cyclist phase will allow these users to safely move through the intersection while all cars are stopped. And then once again, while the bicycle signal is red, right turns will be permitted. What we are proposing to get this built more quickly is an interim partial tactical permanent installation of the bidirectional bikeway between Gottingen Street and Spring Garden Road. This will complete the connection to Sexton Campus and maintain the existing unidirectional facilities between Duke Street and Cogswell Street. The tactical installation will require the full rebuild of a new intersection treatment at Sackville Street to accommodate the use of the required bicycle signals. We're targeting 2024 for the tactical installation. And then moving forward, we are hoping to, with your endorsement today to present to Regional Council in January or in the winter of 2023, and then the interim project installed in 2024. And then the full build out of this project will occur once Cogswell is complete, because having Brunswick Street torn up at the same time as Cogswell would not be desirable. Thank you.
What do you mean?
If you want to tear it all up at the same time.
It's too bad we didn't have the money to just do all these things when COVID was happening, right? Okay, thank you very much for that. And I'll go to, so I need somebody, thank you all for not having anything to say about this excellent project in my district, but someone has to put the motion on the floor. Councillor Cleary beat you a little bit. Councillor Cleary, we'll go to you.
So I'll move that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to, 1, proceed with the preliminary and detailed design of the proposed street configuration and related changes to the right-of-way for Brunswick Street and Gottingen Street as described in the recommended design option section of this report, subject to approval of funding in the capital planning process, and 2, proceed with planning and detailed design for an interim solution that is partly tactical and partly permanent as described in the potential interim/tactical implementation section of this report for construction in 2024.
Seconded by Councillor Lovelace. Could have killed it right there, Councillor Lovelace. Thank you for that.
Awesome when
Do you have
there's just the
anything
three of
to,
us
do
here.
you have anything to say on the matter, Councillor?
Well, as someone who cycles and walks through here several times a week, this is exciting. I'm curious to see, so when you look at the maps and the drawings for how this is going to be laid out, it's hard to tell until you're actually riding through it, because this is one of the things when you, for example, you're coming down South Park to Spring Garden, and you get there and you want to go down Spring Garden, go into the green box, lining up with the traffic. The first number of times you do it, the cars kind of look at you, because when we first implemented, the cars like, what is that cyclist doing? And so it's just one of those things where I think people are getting used to this now, but we have so many people that, are fairly new drivers or infrequent drivers to downtown, that it's one of those things that will continue to happen as we put more and more of these around here. So I will get on my bike from City Hall here. I'll go over to Duke and up Duke. I'm out of breath by the time I hit Brunswick. But then when you're getting up there, you either have to go up Rainy or Gottingen to Rainy, and then illegally move over to the double bike lane, or dismount, walk across, get into the bike lane, and then move up. So, this is just one of those things where until the whole network is connected, 2027, 26, 28, hopefully earlier than later. But, it's one of those things where you're just constantly moving around. So adding this extra piece is going to be great. And especially when the timing lines up. So this is done, Cogswell's done, we move this, we connect it all. I can see the vision. I wish it was happening faster, but I can see the vision, how this is going to come together. I just won't know how it's going to function until I'm actually riding in it. And when you have unidirectional bike lanes on the, what's the opposite of contraflow? Just the proper flow, I don't know, with flowing traffic, it physically feels and emotionally feels better moving around. When you have double bike lanes and you've got to switch around, so where Rainy comes down now, I'll be interested to see how that connects to the double bike lane on Brunswick and how you move, especially down to Spring Garden or you move up Gottingen. So I like it. I'm happy we're moving this. I'm very happy we're doing a partial tactical. So a little bit cheaper, see how it works. Because when we did Hollis Street, for example, it looked good on paper. It didn't work so good when you actually did it. So it took a while to figure out what the next iteration was. I'm happy to see this. I'm happy to try it. Looking forward to seeing this. Happy that's going to hopefully happen in 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you so much. Wow, this is exciting. I'm a huge proponent of burying the lines. You know, I've got this one little street in Brookline, all the lines are buried, the whole, just everything, the whole ambiance, just the milieu of it is so lovely without those lines. And it's just smarter. So I'm glad to see that, fully in support of that. I will say, though, that, you know, traffic is already backed up right now from the corner of Gottingen and Brunswick all the way over to Cogswell and past, right? And then when the Moosehead game gets out, or, you know, the concert or the show or whatever is out, that entire section is full of thousands of people and hundreds of cars. And I'm not sure that this is going to be much of a solution for that. In fact, I'm looking at this thinking, this might actually cause more problems and more backups. I am happy, though, that we're moving ahead and looking at this from a tactical perspective, because I think once you do it and you're able to learn from it and realize what's working and what isn't working is extremely important. I do wonder, through all of this, where's our business associations? Where are they sitting at? What are we hearing from them? And you know, good to hear that Parks Canada is working nicely with us, because, you know, they have a huge stake in the game, right? This is a premier tourism asset for them. So obviously, you know, having that look much more beautiful and having it much more accessible is important. So thank you to Parks Canada. Yeah, so I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about what we're hearing from the stakeholders and the businesses.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. We have spoken with Events East as well about this project.
Yep.
So in relation to the Mooseheads and events at the center, we aren't actually changing a lot of the traffic function at the Brunswick Duke Gottingen intersection. And that is partly because it is an AT-IMP priorities project. So we are looking at pedestrian and alternative and active transportation here. We do feel that one of the big challenges when people leave those games is people aren't parking at Scotiabank Centre, because there is no parking at Scotiabank Centre. They're parking in the areas around. So getting that foot traffic out quickly and effectively, and making sure that pedestrians have a place that's safe to stand while they're waiting to cross. Because right now what happens is pedestrians spill out into the street and they're just sort of moving everywhere.
Yep.
So through the use of those bump outs and those larger curb extensions we're creating, we're hoping that that will help assist in some of that, because it'll provide more space for pedestrians who are waiting and moving through the area. And it is one of the reasons that we're looking at retaining that left turn lane, because we do know that is a primary way people get in, especially to the large parking structure at Scotia Square.
Yes,
As far as the business associations, primarily this is downtown Halifax. Steve Arenos and the Folklore Center fall under the Spring Garden Area Business Association. We did meet with representatives from both. They are both in support. The big thing for Spring Garden Area was they were concerned about the preservation of the patio at Steve Arenos, because there was, the conversation of parking and loading versus patio there.
Right.
And it was felt that, making sure that that sidewalk was wide enough to retain the sidewalk cafe that exists was the priority, and moving loading needs onto Doyle Street, right around the corner, would be sufficient. And the downtown Halifax, we've received no opposition. They've been well in support of the project. Happy to see something happening and some streetscaping happening in the area.
Yes, absolutely. So, personal note, Steve Armbruster is the founder of Steve Arenos, was the first person who gave me a job when I first moved to Halifax. This was pre-Steve Arenos. And he was a great guy. Thank you so much for the presentation.
It sure was. Thank you, Councillor Lovelace. For my part, my walk home is up Sackville Street, right? So I cut across the slip lane you're proposing to get rid of, walking my bike. And to Councillor Cleary's out of breath comment, I had a friend say 15 years ago when I really started biking, Halifax is a great bike city. You just walk your bike up the hills. And I do, right? Because I'm not biking up Duke Street and I'm not biking up Sackville, not anymore. yeah, I think the pedestrian benefits actually are huge here on on this, as much as the cycling benefits. Getting rid of that slip lane is excellent, and really, I bet the traffic modeling shows it doesn't actually get that much traffic, but the traffic it gets is like, I'm just going, and I'm going to drop the hammer as I come around this corner. So I support this. I think that the interim approach is great. I would love to get to the buried power and all those things. I do want to acknowledge, even though I support this and want it to go ahead, that we've had some pretty strong feedback from the, I can't remember the name of the business, the optometrists who were there in the Cambridge Suites building, Inside Optometry. Thank you, Councillor Cleary. And they are concerned about losing the street parking, and they've definitely been quite vocal about that. And yet, I still think the net benefit of this is worth looking at moving forward. And I also note that the building they're in has surface parking lot in front of it. So I think that can be managed there. But I wanted to acknowledge, because I don't want them to come back later and say, you didn't even talk about it. So I know that we've all gotten those emails, and I thank them for being involved in the process. I see Councillor Cleary's dropped on to make another comment, so we'll go to him and then we'll have a vote. Thank you.
Well, just when you were speaking, it twigged two things to me. So when I look at this, though, some parking is being removed, but it looks like a number of parking spaces are being maintained, and I'm not entirely sure. I did see a picture. I'm trying to find it now in the report. When you look up Sackville Street, because you're getting rid of the slip lane and creating that extra curb extension, did I not see it? I don't know if they were just in the picture as cars moving, but they look like cars parked, which you can't do now on that part of Sackville Street. So it looks like we were adding parking, which is just my full disclosure. My wife and family go to Inside Optometry, and I walk because I'm a good human being. She drives and she parks in the Cambridge Suites parking lot. But can you just, and I'm looking for I don't know if it's in here, how many parking spots will be lost, how many parking spots are being added, the net loss. But it looks like we are taking away, we are adding some, and we're maintaining a bunch too. So, I mean, it's not, unlike South Park, where, there was a hue and cry around, oh my God, parking. We actually maintained quite a few parking spaces there. I forget the net number entirely, but it was only like 20 or 30 or 50, something spots were lost. Anyway, is there a number here I just can't find on how many spots are being lost, how many are being added? And ancillary to that, that extra green space you're creating now, because when you're walking up Brunswick and going up Sackville, you've got the retaining wall. So as you come around there and you come up, it flattens out. And I think that new part is going to be quite flat. Is there something we can do with that, or is it just going to be an passive open space?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, thank you for the question. As far as parking goes, well, first of all, thank you for bringing up Inside Optometry. I did not mean to omit that. I have seen the emails. We have responded. They provided lots of great information about their parking needs. As far as retaining parking, we have retained all the parking we're able to along the east side. We're also looking at opportunities to add some additional spaces that may be created due to some of the changes that we've made. And you are correct, on Sackville Street, we are hoping that we may be able to add a few spaces along that island. I believe it was 8. That hasn't been confirmed with parking yet. We don't know for sure that we can do that, but we are hoping that we may be able to gain some spaces there. And I believe, and there's a couple other spots where we're able to hopefully add in a few. I don't have the exact number handy for the net loss. I believe it is in the report. I just don't have the number there.
Yeah, okay. And that little
Brad's
green,
saying 20.
and that little green space, because I know you're a landscape architect, is there anything we can do with that green space? And just from looking at it, because right now as a pedestrian, that area sucks.
Yes.
So, and it's hard to go across because from the sidewalks, the pedestrian part of that is improved 400%. But is there anything we can do with that space?
We're hoping to create a nice little plaza space in that new green space. It's something we're going to look at with Parks Canada for some opportunities. Right now, we've just sort of shown some green space with some trees and some sidewalk conceptually, but we are hoping to create a really nice place, little plaza space there that'll tie into downtown and tie into the hill and create a really special little spot right in the downtown, because it is, right now, it's not a great corner for pedestrians or anyone, so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And I will say Parks has had approached, at the same time as staff was coming to me to talk about this as area councillor, Parks approached me because they intend, I believe in the next construction season, to put the stairs back in on that corner going up to the path. And they've hired a consultant to make that happen. So there's lots of interesting things that can happen there. There's nobody else on the list, so we'll move to a vote. Question's been called. All those in favor? Carries unanimously. Oh, opposed? I didn't look. You said yes? Just making sure. Just making sure. Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Before staff leave, I want to say something. We've had a heck of a year. We've all worked really, really hard. You guys have worked your butts off, and you deserve a long, long break. And I hope you're all going to have a really nice holiday. I hope you take my advice. If you email me right now, I've already got my away message set, and it says, my advice to you is to take your phone, turn it off, put it in your sock drawer, delete social media from your personal phone, leave your laptop on your home desk. Sorry, Brad, I'm saying all this to your staff, and recharge, right? I like all of you have worked so hard, and I appreciate everything you do, and thank you so much for what was really a difficult year, and I thank you all for that. So. Now you can leave because we're going to do, except for the people working on bike lanes get the Christmas off too, Sean. That's not correct. So yeah, thank you all for everything you do, and I really appreciate all that hard work.
After you found 4%.
No, I'm not saying that. That's not my. You know how I feel about that. Okay, so thank you. That closes off staff reports. 12.2, there's nothing for, we're going to do in camera very last, okay, everybody? So we're going to just run through the rest of the public agenda. Members of standing committee, there is none. There are no motions. The in camera will go to after we go through the rest of this. Added items, none. Notices of motion. Does any member of council have a notice of motion? Of committee? No. Seeing none, we'll move to public participation. I see one person who possibly may want to speak. But may not. Peter? I figured if you'd sat here the whole time, you might want to say a few words, so. We expect nothing less, sir. Thank you for coming. The floor is yours. If we could have, there you go. Perfect.
Okay. Altogether, I'm encouraged and impressed by what we saw today from the staff
Could you identify
reports.
yourself and who you're here representing today?
Okay. I'm here, mixture of myself, and I'm also the chair of the Halifax Cycling Coalition. We have, of course, an interest in saying, push it harder, faster, get it done. Okay. It's on a good track. We'd love to see it, all the timelines moved up by a year. That said, what I have are some comments and observations about how it has been done. Hopefully we will come up with better solutions going forward. One of the things I've seen is the city's made some good changes. They haven't publicized what the changes are going to be at the street level before they start. I used to be a journalist. You tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you remind them, okay? So before construction starts, just after the surveyors have been through, you start putting up signs that say, oh, we're going to close Spring Garden Road for through traffic, okay? They didn't do that. And they have to be large enough and placed so that pedestrians and cyclists and even drivers can get a sense there's some change coming here because people are uncomfortable with changes. So announce it well before, and I'm sorry, social media doesn't help. When you're driving a car, when you're riding your bike, when you're out for a walk, pushing a baby carriage or whatever, social media doesn't speak to you. Signs, nice looking, clear graphics near the paths that people are taking by that or through that, those might work. And okay, tactical changes. You've made tactical changes, they're in place. Observation and comments from the user community, cyclists, say, oh, that intersection between Bell Road and Sackville Street doesn't work coming from Sackville to go into the bike lane going up Bell Road. It's ill-begotten. Well, it's been a tactical change that's been in place for 2 years now. And, oh yes, we've called into the 311 and nothing has changed. My understanding of a tactical approach is you do it, and that's prototyping, okay? You do it, then you observe right after, and then you make changes if what you've just tried doesn't work. You don't wait 2 years. You don't wait 2 winter seasons to get something right when you can see after the first big snowstorm, hey, what's going on doesn't work so well. So I'd say the clue, and I'm glad to hear there is now a dedicated staffing looking out of Public Works, looking at the maintenance of these bike lanes and such. That's real progress. We're going to keep pounding you with suggestions and observations from the field. The standards that are adequate clearing for snow for pedestrians, elderly pedestrians, pedestrians pushing a baby carriage or having 2 toddlers in tow. I'm sorry, the job we've seen on the streets of Halifax just doesn't cut it. Too slow, too late, poorly done. You need a brush kind of thing that will clear the sidewalks so they are clear and dry, so somebody who is using a white cane to navigate with can actually feel those nice little bumps that tell them they're about to step into the street. I live in the heart of the peninsula, and I go by, and it might be 4 days before the snow is clear enough for that to happen. Not acceptable. I mean, you have, as a city, committed to this bloody silly graphic, which says, oh, first we're going to make changes. It's the IMP diagram, okay? And it says, people who walk are the top of the heap, then people who bicycle, then people who take transit. And I'd note that if you're taking transit, you're a pedestrian first. You got to get to the bus stop.
30 seconds.
Okay. That this does not represent the performance we see. We see the cars first, and the very last ones who get attention. On your website that's saying what are the snow clearing standards, it's at the bottom of the line. It says, oh, here's what we do for the pedestrians. And oh yeah, we're not going to show you a picture of what our standards are. Well, you show it for the cars. You don't show it for the pedestrians. That means you have contempt for the pedestrians. I'm sorry. Messaging is very damn important. And so you should say your messages. If a consultant is doing a report, they have to put the people considerations and the bicycle considerations before they start talking about the cars. Full stop. I'll end there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On point, as always. I will say, though, and normally we don't respond to these, but I'm going to just say the Sackville Bell Road, we got an email, and I sent it to Dave or Hanita, and the tactical people actually moved the curbs out so a bike can get through now along the old curb line rather than having to go around. So it only took 18 months instead of still not being done in 2 years, which is cold comfort. Thank you very much for your presentation. Unless either of our media representatives in the audience would like to speak and chastise us from the mic, I'm seeing a shake of head from both of them. Matt's tempted, I think, but no, I don't think he's going to. So seeing none, then I would accept a date of the next meeting is January 26, 2023. I'll accept the motion to move in camera. Moved by Councillor Lovely, seconded by Councillor Cleary that we move in camera. All those in favor? Okay, we're moving in camera. See all you folks later. Still says in camera up there, so we might want to change that. Oh, we're ratifying in camera, but in public. Okay, I'm keeping up. Does somebody want to move the in-camera ratification motion, please? Councillor Cleary.
I move that the Transportation Standing Committee, 1, adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential report dated December 1, 2022, and 2, direct that the private and confidential report dated December 1, 2022 be maintained private and confidential.
Moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Lovelace. Any further discussion? There can't be, because all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Sorry, that was carries unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. So, I already said the date of the next meeting is January 26, 2023. Have yourself a happy holiday and a Merry Christmas. Motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn from Councillor Lovelace. We are
There we go.
adjourned. Thank you all. Wow.